Hey there, it's Dave with FlipperForce. I'm excited to announce we just launched our new Vendor 1099 report just in the nick of time for tax season. So, our new Vendor 1099 report provides a global summary of total compensation that you've paid to your vendors on all of your projects in a given tax year, which is going to be handy to help you issue your 1099s this tax season. So I've got open our new Vendor 1099 report here. You can access it from our sidebar under the Global Accounting Reports section. So we have project accounting reports, which are project specific accounting reports, and then we have our global accounting reports, which are accounting reports that provide a global financial overview of all of your expenses on all of your projects globally across your company workspace. So right now we just have our new vendor 1099 report, and then we also have a global account expense report, but we are going to be adding in a new detailed vendor report, which will show you all of the detail that goes into these vendor summaries that we've got shown here on our vendor 1099. And then we've got a new global final profit statement, which is going to be coming out soon as well. So let's dive into how our vendor 1099 report works. So you can see we basically have a list of vendors here, and these are the companies and vendors that we've added to our companies and contacts area, which you can find here in the sidebar. And what our vendor 1099 report is showing is it's showing how much those vendors have been compensated globally on all of our projects in the year 2020. And then on the right here, the report highlights whether the contractor is actually going to be eligible or required to receive a vendor 1099 form. So the 1099 eligibility column, this is something you'll need to set up manually for each company or vendor in your system. And if you're unfamiliar with 1099s, the most basic general rule is that you must issue a 1099 to any eligible contractors that you've paid at least $600 in services in the tax year. But just like everything that's tax related, there's going to be all kinds of weird, confusing rules and exclusions. So first, you need to determine if the contractor is actually eligible to receive a 1099. And then once you determine if they're actually eligible, you'll need to determine if they've received over $600 in compensation in that tax year. So before we dive into these complicated tax issues, let me just clarify and disclaim that I'm not an accountant and I don't pretend to be one, so please do your own research and always talk to an accountant or a tax professional, as well as consult with the detailed IRS guidelines for determining who you actually need to send these 1099s to for your business. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about contractor eligibility. So you'll notice the 1099 eligible column has a drop-down menu to select yes or no. So it's your responsibility to determine if the contractor is eligible to receive a 1099. So here are the basic rules for determining if a contractor is 1099 eligible. So rule number one, you only need to send 1099s to businesses that are structured as an LLC or a partnership. So if the business is a corporation, so an S Corp, a C Corp, you do not need to file a 1099 for corporations. So you may be wondering, how do I know how a business is structured and how do I know if it's a corporation or not? Well, generally, it's always a good practice to get a W-9 form from your contractors, and the W-9 form is just a government form used to request the contractor's tax identification number, and then it provides some basic business information on how the contractor's business is structured, so that way you have that information up front. And now if you go over to the companies and contacts area, you can actually save that information there. So you can save the tax ID number, and then you can even upload the contractor's W-9, so that way you have all of that contractor information already saved in your system for tax season. So You can also edit these contractor eligibility, 1099 eligibility right there directly on the company page, but you can also do it directly on our vendor 1099 report. So again, rule number one is you only need to send a 1099 to businesses structured as an LLC or a partnership. You don't need to file a 1099 for companies structured as a corporation. So if you don't have the company's tax ID number and you don't know how their company is structured, you need to get a W-9 from the contractor. Rule number two, you only need to file a 1099 to contractors that perform a service. So you don't need to file a 1099 for suppliers. So I guess, for example, Home Depot, they're a supplier that is only providing goods or merchandise for the project, so they would not need to receive a 1099 for the project. Rule number three, you only need to file a 1099 for compensation paid to contractors with cash or a check. So if you did pay a contractor with a credit card, you don't need to file a 1099 because the credit card company will actually file those 1099s on your behalf. So those are the main rules to determine if a contractor is eligible to receive a 1099. So based upon those guidelines, you will select if the contractor is eligible to receive a 1099 or not. So I guess, for example, let's go through our list here. ABC Rehab, they're an LLC and they provided installation services that were paid by check. So they are going to be eligible to receive a 1099. So I'm going to select yes here. Deffenbaugh Dumpsters, they're a corporation. I also paid them by credit card, so they're not eligible to receive a 1099 because they're a corporation and I paid by credit card, so I'm going to select no. And then Home Depot, they are a corporation and they're a supplier that I paid by credit card, so that's three strikes against them. So Home Depot, they definitely are not eligible to receive a 1099, so I'm going to select no there as well. Same thing with Lowe's, and then so on. Okay? And then finally, the last rule is based upon the contractor's compensation for the tax year. So again, you only need to send a 1099 to eligible contractors that have received $600 or more of compensation in the tax year. So in the right column, you'll see a little indicator telling you if the contractor has been paid more than $600 on all of your projects that you've worked on with them in the tax year. So basically, if both indicators are showing as yes, meaning the contractor is eligible and the contractor has received over $600 in compensation, then that means you should likely file a 1099 for that contractor. So we do have some filing deadlines coming up quickly. For tax year 2020, you'll need to issue your statements to your recipients by January 31st. So that means you have about 5 days to get a copy of the 1099 to your contractors or your vendors by January 31st. And then you'll need to get the other copy to the IRS, get their copy to them by February 28th. So that's a quick overview of our new vendor 1099 report and how it can help you determine which contractors are eligible to receive a vendor 1099. As always, if you do have any specific questions about tax related questions, be sure to talk to your accountant or a tax professional to help you through that process.